Welcome to this explainer, where we're breaking down a truly intense scenario from episode 4 that pushes human limits right to the absolute edge. Okay, let's just dive straight in. Imagine a normal school environment, a place usually associated with learning, hanging out, making friends. Well, suddenly, that everyday setting is completely transformed into a claustrophobic trap, where every single decision now carries the literal weights of life or death. The characters we're looking at today are physically trapped, they're emotionally exhausted, and honestly, the stakes couldn't possibly be any higher. So think about it. What if your school suddenly became a place where any choice you made could literally be your last? Try to put yourself directly in the characters' shoes for a second. They're coming to this terrifying realization that the immediate, visceral threat of zombies right outside the door is suddenly taking a backseat to something even more insidious growing inside the room. Panic, fear, and shattered trust are quickly becoming just as dangerous as the actual monsters in the hallway. Surviving isn't just about escaping anymore. And that brings us to the core concept for today's analysis, what we call a psychological fracture. Basically, this is the breaking down of mental stability and interpersonal trust under intense pressure and overwhelming hopelessness. I want to use this concept as our main lens for the explainer today because survival in this story has fundamentally evolved. It's gone from a quick physical sprint for the exit into a grueling, exhausting mental marathon. This psychological fracture builds into a pretty grim reality. Right at this point in the story, the trapped students are waking up to a very dark truth. They can't just sit around and wait for a rescue that, let's face it, might never actually arrive. The situation is just deteriorating entirely too fast. With every passing minute, hope becomes significantly harder to hold on to, and every new decision they make seems to create even bigger, more dangerous consequences. You really start to see a stark contrast in how people cope. On one side, you have characters desperately trying to stay calm and use some sort of logical planning to find a way out. But then, on the other side, you've got frantic, erratic barricading based entirely on pure fear. This is actually a classic psychological response known as decision fatigue. When the human brain is just completely overwhelmed by constant, high-stakes choices, logic takes a total backseat. When hope fades, panic grabs the steering wheel. Which leads us straight into a massive crisis of trust. One of the biggest, most heartbreaking themes in this episode is a tragic irony. The group knows that staying together gives them their absolute best chance of physical survival, right? But the crushing pressure of the situation is fundamentally changing who these people are. So the very thing they need most, each other, is being completely undermined by their own stress. There's a line that completely hits the nail on the head here. When danger keeps increasing, even small disagreements become serious problems. That statement perfectly captures the claustrophobic tension we're seeing. On a normal Tuesday in high school, a minor argument about what to do next is just minor. But here, when you're trapped and the stakes are life and death, even the smallest bickering can turn deadly in a matter of seconds. As this emotional tension reaches a boiling point, we see it manifest in wildly different ways. Some students valiantly step up to protect their friends, putting themselves right in harm's way. Others completely freeze, struggling with a paralyzing fear that stops them from acting when it counts the most. And, perhaps most fascinatingly, some start revealing these dark, hidden sides of themselves that were totally buried before the outbreak. The disaster just yanks back the curtain on who these characters truly are. This marks a massive psychological shift in the narrative. This episode is a masterclass in building atmosphere because it's the exact point where the story pivots from a fast-paced action thriller into a deeply unsettling psychological endurance test. It forces the true heavy weight of the situation onto the characters' shoulders, and honestly, onto us as the audience too. Just look at how the themes have evolved. Earlier on, survival felt like a fairly simple equation. Outrun the zombies, escape the immediate danger, run and hide. Easy enough to understand, right? But now the true monsters are the internal battles. The characters aren't just running from the infected anymore. They are actively fighting off severe stress, crippling uncertainty, and this overwhelming wave of hopelessness. Because of this intense internal battle, emotional connections and heavily tested friendships are now the main things driving the critical decisions. The physical action takes a backseat, and the interpersonal drama is basically dictating who lives and who dies. Think about your own friend group for a second. How crazy would those dynamics shift if a minor argument meant someone might literally not make it through the night? And all this brilliant character work shifts our focus as viewers as well. We go from simply wondering who survives, essentially just keeping a tally of the body count, to something much deeper. We start asking, How are these horrific experiences fundamentally changing everyone? This shift makes the danger feel so incredibly real. It keeps us absolutely glued to the story, worrying about the psychological toll rather than just the physical threats. But of course, right when we start focusing heavily on the relationships, the creators totally pull the rug out from under us using the illusion of safety. They use these brilliant little details to constantly manipulate our sense of security. They'll give the characters a moment where they feel safe, where they think, okay, we can finally take a breath, only to abruptly, violently remind us that danger is never ever far away. It's this cruel, looping cycle designed to keep us entirely on the edge of our seats. First, the characters find what feels like a safe haven, maybe a locked room. But almost immediately, step 2 happens. A sound at the door or a shadow in the window proves the danger is still right there. And then step 3, panic and uncertainty skyrocket all over again. The creators use this precise loop to constantly remind us that true safety here is completely an illusion. And this constant cycling breeds a deeply unsettling fear, creating massive amounts of uncertainty. There are 3 core questions just lingering in the air, infecting the entire group. 1, who can actually be trusted when things go wrong? 2, what happens next in a world that's lost all its rules? And 3, the most terrifying of all, is rescue even coming? These unanswered questions create a toxic atmosphere that just slowly eats away at the group from the inside out. So, tying all of this together, Episode 4 pushes far beyond the basic mechanics of survival. It becomes the ultimate test. It's this brutal, unforgiving examination of character, of loyalty, and of pure emotional resilience under the worst possible conditions imaginable. The stakes have well and truly reached their terrifying peak. So, I leave you with this. With trust completely shattered and hope rapidly fading away, who will actually survive the total unpredictability to come? Because if things feel this insanely tense right now, the next chapters are only going to get more chaotic. Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer. If you enjoyed diving into this with us, make sure to like and subscribe so we can keep analyzing and learning together. See you next time.